What's happening, folks? Back with another reaction, back with some more acid techno. And we're back with a tune from a new sub-label in the Stay Up Forever universe. It's called Acid Tags. This is Acid Tag 1, and it came out in December of last year, so it's been out for a little over a month. And I'd like to start by giving a shout out to everyone associated with Stay Up Forever, especially the Liberators, and most specifically to Chris, who continues to push the boundaries of acid techno, bring in a younger generation of talent on his many labels, and who is kind enough to send me records as I have continued to order them from the Stay Up Forever universe. So yes, big shout out to Chris, always the godfather of the UK acid techno scene and sound. And he is one of the producers on this track. This is a tune by the Acid Anarchists, a new trio, I believe, but a couple of the folks go way back, and the other member has been a mainstay of Stay Up Forever and the acid techno scene in the last few years, which is to say, Acid Anarchists are Chris Liberator, Mark MacKenzie, better known as Choci, who his labels Choci's Tunes, VCF, and VCR, they go way back to the 90s as well, and then Sam DFL, who I think has been sort of the Stay Up Forever studio guru of the last couple years. So yes, these are three heavyweights, and as you might expect when they come together, the tunes on this record are great. Now, they produced this tune by themselves, but there's another tune on here they produced with Sortek, a name I've seen in a few places recently, but who I don't know anything about. And then on the other side, there's a producer named Simon Williams. Again, don't know anything about him, but yes, again, Chris Liberator, Choci, and Sam DFL. It's a formidable lineup. And the tune we're going to listen to is Feel the Drums. I did want to give a shout out to Michaela, all the folks who've donated to me as I've run my YouTube and my Patreon. But right before I made this purchase, Michaela had sent me a donation, which made pulling the trigger on buying the record much easier. So big thank you to Michaela. And this tune, as I said, is called Feel the Drums. And I have to say, you know, Choci, his labels, Choci's Tunes and VCF, back in the day, they were sort of like hard acid trance. Now, the line between hard acid trance and acid techno, it was always a little bit blurry, and I think in more recent times, people don't often use the phrase acid trance anymore. It's, you know, like melodic acid techno and so on. But I would say this is definitely acid techno, and there's this kind of, you know, breakdown, you know, wicked, like syncopated beat that shows up at a couple points, which is not something you would have typically heard in acid trance back in the day. But overall, I would say this vibe, or this track, has like acid techno meets or pays homage to old school acid trance. Like, that's kind of the vibe of this record, or of this tune rather, at least as it seems to my ears and brain, which of course is a very subjective evaluation. In any case, let's hear it. This is from Acid Tags 1, a track by the Acid Anarchists, and it's called Feel the Drums. And I apologize, the light has gone out on my turntable, so sometimes it's hard to see where the gap is between the tracks. Huh, but look at that. Like all the little cycling rhythms that are already in the tune. And that subterranean metallic layer. Melodic acid accents. Again, with that ending, it's the kind of track you can end a set with, and also it keeps a lot of elements going close to the end, meaning there are some acid techno tunes that break down so significantly for like the last 64 or even the last 128. It's kind of weird to end a mix on a track like that because it feels like, you know, a lot of energy kind of sucks out and then we're just kind of like, you know, waiting for the track to end. And that kind of track is better in the middle of a set because then you can do a long transition out. Nevertheless, I really enjoy that for multiple reasons. Again, there's a bit of a balance, like those breakdown sections with the wicked, like, you know, distorted, like heavy synth work. That feels very urban, very like underground, you know, warehouse, like, you know, abandoned factory type of vibe. But the more melodic sections, when it's, you know, really truly going, it has a lot of energy, and as I said, those like melodic acid accents, that feels kind of like you could play it at an outdoor party. You could play it like at a desert party with the sun on the horizon and so on. So again, I would most fundamentally categorize that as acid techno, of course, but I do feel like there's a bit of a flavor of some of the old hard acid trance. And again, Choci's labels, like, you know, on his VCF or voltage controlled frequency label in its original run, on a lot of the record sleeves it would say on the back, you know, like the only dedicated acid trance store in London, and it was like, you know, that was kind of the lane. And again, there was a lot of crossover, there was a lot of hybridization with acid techno at the same time. And indeed, that's one of the things I love about the 90s is whether you're talking about a label that was more known overtly for acid techno, like Stay Up Forever, and labels that were calling themselves acid trance, like Choci's Tunes or VCF, there were tracks that kind of could work in a set of either kind. So I very much, that's the era when I fell in love with acid music. So that, like, to me is very nostalgic, and I always enjoy that. So again, this is an acid techno tune, but I feel like there's a bit of a flavor, a bit of an homage to the old school hard acid trance sound. And yeah, again, I like the balance of the tune, not just with the kind of industrial meets a bit more outdoor vibe, but I enjoy the, the rolling percussive rhythms, that little pitter-patter, like industrial drum rhythm that's there for most of the track, and of course in a tune called Feel the Drums, that makes perfect sense. And then in that breakdown, there's a real kind of cycling drum bit, and then before you even know it, right as you're kind of like incorporating that rhythm into your head, boom, it drops back in with the, the proper drop and lead into the second half of the record. So I enjoy the sequencing and the chronology as well. I did also want to give a shout out to Laurie, or Immersion as he was known for most of his famous productions back in the day, who I think goes by Curve Pusher these days. And I was looking at the Discogs release, or the page for this release on Discogs, and I've since discovered that his son Leo is now also in the mastering business, which is to say Curve Pusher, or Laurie, does a lot of mastering of tunes and, the pressing of records, like across not just, the Stay Up Forever label and its sub-labels, but a number of acid techno labels, and I think like non-acid techno music as well. And this is the logo of his infamous, like legendary label, Rootmaster. So yeah, shout out to him. And I believe he was involved in the Smitten label at its very early inception too, according to Mr. Smitten. In any case, the point is, shout out to all the godfathers of the acid scene, as well as to Sam DFL, who again has been a very prominent player in recent years. We'll go through more tracks on this record, and Chris sent me another record in this same package, so we'll be talking about that soon, and I will see you for that one. Peace.